What's going on, everybody? My name is Aiden and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be discussing, or I guess asking, a very interesting question in relation to the Chicago Bulls. And the question goes as this. If for whatever reason we do not bring back Josh Giddey, let's just say another team swoops in, takes him, we don't match the offer, a sign and trade takes place, whatever outcome happens in which Josh Giddey is not a Chicago Bulls player, the question is, how can we as an organization recover from something like that? What are the steps that we need to take in order to bounce back from, in my opinion, such a big blow in this organization, especially if he walks away for nothing? Well, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about it in this video. I'm not going to go full in depth about, oh my goodness, we should go and trade this guy, sign this guy, do this guy. I'm going to talk about different pathways and what the Bulls will have in their assets to recover from such things, if it's even possible. Maybe if we're talking about trades, it's internal trades. I'm not going to say we, for example, should go and sign, I don't know, Trae Young or something like that, you know, in a few years' time, whenever his contract up, whatever the case may be, because we have cap space. You know, I'm not going to say stuff like that, but what directions can we take? That's really the question here. Because it's impossible to really pick this player, that player, this player, because they have to want to come here as well. So it's a two-way street. Anyway, before we get any further, if you liked the video and you want to see more from me, drop a like, drop a follow, and or subscribe if you are new. And let me know what pathways would you take in order to ensure the Bulls can bounce back from a situation like this. So I feel like there's two possible outcomes that can happen here, and two things that could really decide how the Bulls will handle such things. Because I guess the only positive, in my opinion, to not bringing back Josh Giddey is there is money now that we weren't going to give him that we will possess. So more cap space is what I'm trying to say, ladies and gentlemen. So the best possible thing you could do in that situation is re-sign Coby White. I feel like that's going to be a necessity so you don't lose every single asset that we do actually have at our disposal. And two, with the remaining cap space you have, maybe you re-sign Io as well, you become buyers. You look for the best possible free agents out there. You try to lure them in with as much money as possible. And you try to buy your way to success. This hasn't been a great thing for the Chicago Bulls. It really hasn't. It hasn't been a direction that we've gone down that truly has worked. We've not been great buyers. In our championship seasons, we had two players from the draft that ended up taking us to the NBA championships that we won. MJ, Pippen. Two players we selected from the draft. I think Scottie Pippen was more for trade. We traded for him, but still, it was around that draft area. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's kind of always been the route that we went down. We've never been what the Lakers or the Celtics have been. We've never been guys that just absolutely spend buttloads of money to bring players into this organization that will allow us to win championship after championship and to be in the conversation each and every single year. We've not been that sort of team. Maybe this is a direction where we could be that type of team, where we keep Coby White because we're going to need to keep Coby White, and then just buy as much talent, good talent, amazing talent as possible. Get some star power into this team, if it's even possible to do. The fact that we are one of the only teams with massive amount of cap space is interesting, but it needs to be the right free agency period, and the right players need to be available if this is going to be a direction that works. If you re-sign Josh Giddey and you extend Coby White, the cap space that we once had is diminished a lot, which means you won't have room to go and sign all the superstars that you want, you know, or go into the luxury tax in the second apron. You might not have the luxury that we would have if you don't bring back a Josh Giddey. So that's the first outcome right there. Risky, very risky, because again, if money talks, we could be in the conversation, but if it's more than just money, some people don't like Chicago. Some people don't like living in the cold in the winter. Some people prefer to be in a nice sunny LA district. I don't know. But at the end of the day, if it's more than just money, it's going to be a huge gamble. We'll have to see if it could pay off. And then the second outcome, to me, could be we scrap it all and start again. This will be the longer outcome, but it could potentially be the right outcome. So what I mean by this is, all right, you didn't get Josh Giddey. You potentially didn't want to bring back Josh Giddey anyway. So you don't re-sign Coby White either. You let him go, or you trade him this season. You obviously let go of Nikola Vucevic. You maybe start guys like Noah Esenge, And hopefully that Portland pick will eventually kind of come into fruition, and maybe that can convert to the Bulls, I hope. But, you know, we don't really know for sure. The last thing I want is to see that conveyed to 2 second rounders. That would be detrimental for the Bulls, in my opinion, and a complete waste of a pick. And all those sort of things. You just kind of start again. You start from the very beginning with Matas Buzelis being your key guy, your superstar player, your go-to option, your number one option, the guy you're trusting and hoping can be, I guess, the guy for you. And you pray with all your heart that the Bulls select right in the draft. And you build that way. To me, those are the only two options. You can kind of mix and match in between. Obviously, build from the draft, pick, select right, and maybe you do buy free agents as well and try to find that balance there. But to me, it's very complicated, because if you're going to get rid of, like, let's just say you want to do both, right? You want to build from the draft, but you also want to sign free agents. You need to give free agents something to look forward to when they come here. So I think a big reason why, let's just say, for example, hypothetically, Anthony Davis is a free agent and he wants to come to Chicago. You need to give him reasons why he would want to play here. So obviously he's from Chicago, right? But he would want to play with a point guard that's going to pass him the ball. He would like to play in an environment where he's the power forward. He'd like to play in an environment where he's winning games and potentially in contention for championships. That's what superstars want. You know, money's nice. They're always going to get their money, especially if they're superstars. But putting them in an environment where they're going to win games and be a championship threat, you need to give them an option for that to happen. So for a guy like Anthony Davis, being from Chicago is amazing. It's definitely a good asset to have under your belt that he could come home, and that great story. But you need to give him the power forward position. You'd need to give him a chance to compete for a championship. You need to give him the money. You'd need to give him the assets. So getting rid of Josh Giddey and getting rid of Kobe White, for example, and then, let's bring Anthony Davis in, makes no sense. They need to play together. So it's hard to do both. I think it's really one of the two. You either keep Josh Giddey around, first and foremost. You know, this goes against the whole video, but the ideal situation is to keep Josh Giddey around. But if you don't, you need to become buyers, and you need to extend Kobe White, because he's probably the only person that could have an attractive draw to the Chicago Bulls at the moment. He's literally the only one. You know what I mean? So you need to keep him around. You need to kind of build around him for a little bit with Matas Buzelis and become buyers. First option, or you scrap it, rebuild, become the Washington Wizards for 5 years, you know, the Detroit Pistons at a time for 5 years, and pray that this Bulls team selects the right pieces around them to be in the threat for the playoffs each and every single season and to compete for championships. That's the route. That's our options. And I think this is why the Josh Giddey situation is extremely important. Because we're going to sign a player, if we do sign him, that could potentially average close to a triple-double, could potentially impact winning, and he's at a young age. So he fits the brackets of a rebuilding team and potentially a competing team in the future. That's why it's so important that he's here. I hope we get it done, because I feel like the ramifications if we don't get this done is going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. And it's going to be a very frustrating process as well. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Thank you for watching. The severity, in my opinion, is very high. So we need to get this done. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for more. Take care. And peace.